Hi, my name's Paul. I'm a personal trainer and nutritionist, and today I felt compelled to do a video about an article that came out on the BBC on the 21st of August. It was also published in many of the Western world's news agencies, and the point I want to get across to you first and foremost is that you really do not want to take these headlines at face value. What you have to understand is, in the media, especially the American media, not so much in the BBC, but they do have their own ideology, I believe. But in the American media, they are really governed by the advertising that they receive. So they're always going to promote things that are going to favour the companies that spend money with them as far as advertising goes. Also the pharmaceutical companies. So the message I want to get across to you on this video is, don't trust it at face value. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions, okay? But I'm going to go through it. We'll look at the results. First of all, I'll just show you quickly the headlines from the CNN and also the headline from Fox News. Meat consumption linked to higher type 2 diabetes risk in an observational study. So an observational study, This is what the study is. It's basically a meta-analysis of lots and lots of other studies that have been done. In fact, I've looked at the data that's on this study, and you're talking about over 50 years. They've taken data. A lot of these studies were never published because they were probably trying to find out other things. And they probably didn't find out what they wanted to find out. That's why they don't get published. But they probably had some information in there that they could use to actually embellish this particular meta-analysis that they've decided to put together. There are people doing this that have actually got an agenda. We'll get into that in a little while. So, as I said, meta-analysis, 31 studies, 20 different countries, but it was taken over 53 years. So the newspaper headlines are warning, eat a ham sandwich a day increases the risk of type 2 diabetes. But experts say it's not that simple. No, I would probably agree with them. A study of nearly 2 million people from 20 different countries found a link between both red and processed meat, such as steak, bacon and sausages. While the research has been done well, the findings are nuanced and should not cause fear or panic. So revert back to the headline on the BBC website, and it shows a picture of a ham sandwich, and although they're only focusing on the meat, and at no point in the whole of the study or whole of the article do they actually mention the bread that it's in. What you need to understand about diabetes is it is a metabolical issue which is caused by too high blood sugar. High blood sugars in the body are almost 100% caused by a high carbohydrate diet. At any one time, your body is trying to maintain a sugar level in the blood of no more than 4 grams. So whenever you're scoffing down bread, pasta, pizza and all that sort of food, you're taking in vast amounts of carbohydrate. And although the body can mitigate this for many, many years, in fact, eventually you will get an issue where the insulin can no longer force the carbohydrate into cells. So it gets left in the blood, where it then starts damaging your arteries and the blood cells that are within the blood. So I want to move on now to the lead researcher of this meta-analysis, her name is Nita Ferruri. She's from the University of Cambridge, who actually funded this study. She pretty much ties her flag to the mast. She supports the recommendations to limit the consumption of processed meat. So she does say type 2 diabetes is high blood sugar levels due to the body making too little of a hormone called insulin. That isn't really what diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is actually all about. It's not because you're making too little of the hormone. What it is there's too much carbohydrate in the blood for the insulin to deal with. And so the body ramps up the level of insulin to try and deal with it, and then that starts causing all the problems downstream, like I mentioned earlier. But let's look a bit more into Nita Ferruri. Here's a study she done 9 months ago. As I said, she almost definitely has her own beliefs in this regard. She done a study, or she actually done a report on a study that was done 9 months ago. Plant-based swaps may cut diabetes and heart disease risk, a major review finds. And what they actually said in the study was that replacing processed meat can actually help reduction of type 2 diabetes by 20%. So what does 20% actually mean in real terms? If you look at real terms, relative risk as opposed to actual risk, if you go back to the BBC study of the 2 million people and just over 100,000 incidents of diabetes in a 10-year median period, that worked out at 18.8 people per 100,000 developed type 2 diabetes in that 10-year median period. If you reduce it by 20%, you're actually reducing it from 18.8 to 15 people per 100,000. That really isn't a significant number, bearing in mind that these studies and these meta-analyses that have been pulled together are done by people that are really, really, really wanting to find the results that they believe are the cause. They're having to squint really, really hard to actually come up with what they believe. So this is what she said about that previous study. She's an expert in nutrition, diabetes and obesity at the University of Cambridge MRC Epidemiology Unit, and said the most convincing findings from the study were for swapping processed and unprocessed red meat with plant-based foods. So she's a plant-based advocate. So you can read that. If you want to pause it, I'll move on to the next page. This is where the actual study was first published. It was in the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology journal. So they say there's an inevitable limitation. It cannot prove meat causes diabetes because there isn't any meta-analyses of epidemiological studies that can ever prove any cause or risk from any type of nutritional study because it's never been done. There is nothing out there that's ever been proved because you couldn't do the study. So we're dealing with hypothesis all the time, but we're also dealing with people that always want to find a particular result. When you have a hypothesis that something causes something, you actually should set out to disprove your hypothesis. Let's try and find out how much we can prove that it's not actually the case that we think this is causing this. These people are actually setting out to try and prove that this causes this because that is what they want to find out. That's their agenda. If they'd done a study that showed no results whatsoever, you would never see the study. So they can manipulate the figures to actually come up with some sort of result. This is the actual headline in the Lancet. meat consumption, an incidence of type 2 diabetes, an individual participant federated meta-analysis of 1.97 million adults, 100,000 incident cases from 31 cohorts in 20 countries. Out of the 31 cohorts, 12 of those were North American studies, which I'm going to go to in a little bit more depth very, very shortly. If you look at the list of people here, this is just about 30% of the authors, the main authors of all the different studies that we used. I've done research on a lot of these people. We have a lot of people that are plant-based, they're vegan, they're vegetarian, they are part of churches, the Latter-day Saints, they're part of the Seventh-day Adventists. They are all ideological groups. They all have theology. Their nutrition is based on their theology, a lot of them. So again, these are people trying to find the results that we come up with. These are results in real figures, and I'll try and break this down. I'm not a real good statistician, but I do understand some of this. So there was a follow-up, a median of 10. It was actually over 7 to 15 years follow-up. But so they take a median of 10, so that's sort of like the middle figure across all the cohorts. So they were assuming that they were eating 110 grams up from nothing to 110 grams of unprocessed red meat per day, 49 grams up to 49 grams of processed meat per day, and up to 72 grams of poultry per day. They claim that the greater consumption of each of these three types of meat was associated with increased incidence of type 2 diabetes, with the hazard ratio of 1.1. That is a mean figure of a 95% confidence interval of 1.06 to 1.15. So that's the best result they could come up with for the general meat, I think, not the processed. So that was for the unprocessed meat, and for the processed meat, it was a little bit higher, 1.15 median or confidence interval, 1.1 to 1.2. In fact, the chicken only. So if you look at the chicken, it only comes. The confidence interval is from 1.02, so almost nothing. Bear in mind, if it was 1, it would mean there was absolutely no change whatsoever. 1.1 means it's a 10% increase, bearing in mind it's over 10 years. What they're saying, it's over 10 years. Another thing you have to bear in mind is that these studies, most of these studies were done on middle-aged to older age people. The biggest single participant age range was 40 to 60 years old. So you've got no idea what they've done up to 40 years old. You've got no idea what type of lifestyle they lived, what type of intake they had, food, whether they smoked, whether they exercised. You're just following them from the age of 40 to 60, and this is the type of results you're trying to come up with. Is another diagram of the results, and up in the top left-hand corner you have the Americas, the 12 Americas that were part of the 31 cohorts, and what you've got, what they represent, if you look at the blue circles, the unprocessed red meat, the weight of this study, taking into consideration just them 12 studies out of the Americas, the weight of the study was 57.5% in the unprocessed meat. In the processed meat, it was 56.3%, and in the poultry, it was 62.2%. So basically, the weight of this study was almost 59% of the total study. Bearing in mind, America is almost undoubtedly the most unhealthy country on the planet, with the most unhealthy diet, the standard American diet, the SAD diet they call it, where the fast food is cheaper to eat than it is to actually eat a healthy diet. It's highly promoted. There's a massive advertising industry driving the Americans to eat the way they eat. So if you were to take out the American part of this study, what you're left with is Europe, Eastern Mediterranean, South Asia, Western Pacific, and East Asia. And if you were to pull them results, the results would show a hazard ratio of probably about 1.005. So you're talking about 0.5% of the population of the 2 million people over a 10-year period would develop type 2 diabetes. And as I said again, these people doing this study are really, really trying hard to come up with a result. The interpretation of the study: the consumption of meat, particularly processed meat and unprocessed red meat, is a risk factor for developing type 2 diabetes across populations. These findings highlight the importance of reducing meat consumption for public health and should inform dietary guidelines. As I said earlier, you cannot inform on risk or causation because there is no study that's ever been done to prove that. These studies cannot prove that. They are based purely on food questionnaires where people are really trusted to actually say what they think they've eaten over a 10-year period or a 2-year period, or if they follow it up on a yearly basis. So let's look at the funding by the EU, the Medical Research Council, and the National Institute of Health Research Cambridge Biomedical Research Centre. They are funded largely by donations. I'm sure they set out to do things in a proper manner, but they are still also funded by pharmaceutical companies and food industry that are looking for results that are going to be favourable to target medications and advertising in some way that can inform people to eat their particular food products. So you have to take any funding with a little bit of a pinch of salt. Let's summarise what we need to take away from this article. It's based on, as I said, a meta-analysis of epidemiological studies based over a long period of time. In fact, some of the studies that we use were never published originally because they obviously didn't prove what they were trying to prove in other regards. Never trust epidemiology because it doesn't inform of risk or cause, in whether it be diabetes, whether it be cancer. The figures they come up with are always very, very weak. Bearing in mind that the people that are doing the studies are really, really trying hard to come up with what they believe to be the case because it suits their ideology, theology, beliefs, whatever. So advocate for yourself, do your own research, follow me for more videos like this because I want to keep putting it out there. I want people to take their health into their own hands. So like and subscribe, share it with others if you think it's valuable, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you.